grabar. Estamos grabando la clase del día miércoles 15 de diciembre del grupo 3 de la UMCE. Hoy día el objetivo es revisar, hacer este review de adverb phrases y luego de eso poder realizar ejercicios. So, let's begin. Adverb phrases. Un segundito para sacar mi tableta.
Profe,
Dígame.
en el correo que acaba de enviar no hay nada adjunto.
¿Segura?
Al menos a mí no me aparece nada.
Le
No
creo.
sé el resto.
Dame un segundito. Dame un segundito. No hay nada adjunto. Voy a responderle a todos. Voy a seleccionar un archivo y lo voy a colocar de nuevo. Oraciones. Abrir. En teoría. Ahora sí. Ahora sí. Respondo. En teoría iba y según yo está adjunto. Si lo puede revisar y me avisa, por favor.
Sí, profe, ahora sí.
Ya, gracias. Ok, let's do it. Adverb phrases. Esto va a ser muy sencillo y rapidito. Introduction. Adverbs usually occur as clause elements. Adverbials, they usually occur together with lexical verbs adding information to the short clauses. Okay, to begin with, adverbs are part of the lexical words. They are usually, okay, they can be placed into different syntactic contexts. One of them is as a modifier and the other one is as a clause element. In this slide is telling us that they usually occur as clause elements, like adverbials. The function, they serve two major roles, integrated into an element of the clause modifier. Okay, that's wrong because it's not an element of the clause, but an element of the phrase. Let's remember that in phrases, inside of phrases, we can find modifiers. Inside of clauses, we will find valency patterns. Okay. They usually modify an adjective or another adverb, which is true and false. It is true because they usually modify adjectives. They can also modify adverbs, but we can also find them inside of verb phrases. Let's take, for example, these complex verb phrases. I will always play. I will always play. Will always play then has an adverb in the middle. That's the intrusive element, creating a discontinuous verb phrase. Therefore, adverbs can, as a modifier, can be placed in three different phrases: adjective phrases, adverb phrases, and verb phrases. First example, I'm almost positive that she borrowed that off Barbie. We have an adjective phrase, almost positive, where the adjective head is positive, and then almost is an adverb pre-modifier. Second example, first, health service managers must be able to price their services reasonably accurately for trading purposes. And then in the second example, we have an adverb phrase, reasonably accurately, where we have an adverb head, right? And the other one is an adverb pre-modifier. The second example is quite interesting because reasonably accurately shows both rows, right? Because the unit, the entire unit, reasonably accurately is an adverbial, therefore fulfilling that role. And the other point is that reasonably is an adverb modifying another adverb. Nothing new. Adverbs as clause elements, that is to say adverbials. I think she will be married shortly. And in this example, shortly is the adverb phrase adverbial, which is modifying the clause. What is interesting about this example is the fact that shortly can be thought as being part of, okay, no. Adverbials are modifying clauses, right? Like the entire clause. So the question is shortly modifying the entire clause, that is to say, I think she will be married, or the clause in which it's inside of? I'm going to provide the analysis and try to explain this a little bit. Okay, I think she will be married shortly. I'm going to make it bigger. Okay. Okay. So we have a subject, a verb, and here we have an omitted that. I think that she will be married shortly. Therefore, we have a clause. Whenever we find clauses, we're going to close them or separate them by using square brackets. So here we are going to use square brackets. And then inside of it, we're going to have more phrases. She will be, and then the question, married is a verb or an adjective? She will be married. I can say, I married that person, right? So as a verb, I married that person. I married that person. Therefore, I can think that married would be a verb. But the problem is, I can say a married woman, right? A married person. I can say a married person. Sounds really weird, right? A married person. And in this case, this is an adjective, right? So how can I state the difference? It's really difficult, right? Um, Therefore, the question again, the question is married part of the verb phrase or not? So I'm going to try to change married in order to see whether it's a verb or an adjective. I'm going to use its antonym, single, right? I think she will be single shortly, and it works, right? It works. Therefore, married is performing the role of an adjective. Therefore, I will say that married is an adjective. When? Shortly. Yeah. So shortly. Okay, let's do the entire thing before. And this is a that clause. The real name is that nominal clause. Inside of it, we have another valency pattern, right? Because it's a clause. Adjective, phrase, subject, complement, because it's an adjective and is following the verb to be, which is a copular verb. And then I have shortly, which is an adverb phrase performing the role of adverbial. Okay, my first question was, is shortly modifying the green or the red part, right? Why is it interesting, or why is it important to discuss that? It's relevant because adverbials, they are movable objects. You know that, and they're optional, so you can erase them and you can move them. But they can move just inside of its own clauses. That is to say, if shortly is modifying, I think she will be married shortly, she will be married, then shortly is part of the bigger valency pattern, right? But if shortly is part of the green part, right, is an element of the green clause of that clause of the that nominal clause object, then it can only be moved inside of that clause. So, for example, I can say, I think she will be married shortly. I think that she shortly married, something like that, right? And that would be one of the proofs that I can do in order to know whether the adverbial is part of the bigger clause or not, right? I think shortly is modifying the idea of will be, right? When, shortly. Therefore, is not modifying the other verb, think, right? Therefore, I put that adverbial inside of the that clause. Possibly, the Wesleyan Church tolerated outside unions unofficially. In a way, the Anglican Church did not. I can see two different adverbs, possibly and unofficially. Both of them are adverbials. I can move them, right? Or erase them. The Wesleyan Church the Wesleyan Church tolerated outside unions, possibly, right? And I can exchange that with the other adverbial, right? And officially, the Wesleyan Church tolerated outside unions, right? So those are adverb phrases playing the role of adverbial, nothing new. The same adverb might function in both roles. Yeah. Apparently, adjectives. Let's remember that adjectives, they can play two different roles, right? They can be modifiers, that is to say, attributive adjectives, or they can be clause elements, that is to say predicative adjectives. And apparently there are some adjectives which cannot play both roles, right? There are others which can. Why do I say that? Well, because we have central and peripheral adjectives. Please review last lesson. Then adverbs, they as it says, the same adverb might function in both roles, so you don't have that problem. To put on a gray shirt once more was strangely pleasing. The verb phrase was strangely pleasing is a discontinuous verb phrase with an adverb pre-modifier strangely. Therefore, that's a modifier. In the second example, strangely, comma, he sleeps soundly with Skeeter in the house. Strangely, in this respect, in the second example, then is part of the clause, therefore is an adverb phrase adverbial. And those are the proofs that you can have the same adjective performing the same adverb performing the same roles, both roles. Adverb formation. They are sometimes described as words ending in ly, and that's perhaps the most well-known construction type, right? Whenever we are asked about, okay, is this an adverb or not, the very first stuff we're going to do usually is to take a look at the ending, whether it has or not a bound suffix, derivational, a bound suffix, derivational morpheme, right? ly, right? So the class is actually very diverse. Then you have the adverb actually, and that adverb is ending in ly. Therefore, we can recognize it immediately. But the problem is the second adverb in the very same example, very doesn't end in ly, but it's an adverb anyway, right? As a consequence of that, we will state that there are different ways in which we can create adverbs. We have the simple adverb, which are not derived from any other word, like for example, very. There you have some others. The simple adverb can be used as another part of the speech. Like usually you have that problem. And here I'm going to spend a couple of minutes trying to explain the way in which we are going to state differences between them. Okay, a fast card and then you run fast. The problem is one is an adverb and the other one is an adjective. If you take a look at the dictionary, then you're going to see that the word the lexium fast can be or can belong or it belongs to two different word families, right? Word categories. It can be an adjective and an adverb. The problem is how can I state one from the other? And the answer is in tactic context. In the very first example, in the very first phrase, what we have is a noun phrase, right? Okay, and inside of noun phrases, we have modifiers and heads, right? As it's a noun head, we're going to say car is the head because it's a noun. And then we know that a is a determiner pre-modifier, but the question is fast an adverb or an adjective? And the answer is an adjective, but the question is why? Well, because the context, that is to say, a noun phrase, in front of that you have a determiner and then you have a noun, and the word fast is clearly modifying the word car, which is a noun, will help us to know, or will help us to declare that it's an adjective, right? In the second example, you have, or what we have is not a phrase, but we have a clause. In this clause, we have three different elements. We have a noun phrase subject, a verb phrase verb, and then fast. How do you run? You run fast, right? So it's providing information about the verb or the action, right? It's telling you how. This is an adverbial. We know that adverbials are usually created by adverbs, right? And on the other hand, it is yeah, I think that's the whole explanation, right? We know that adverbials are usually adverbs. Fast can be an adjective or an adverb, right? If it would be an adjective, then what we will have is a subject complement. But as it is an adverbial, it is clearly an adverb phrase. Therefore, fast is an adverb. Head. As a summary, it's a matter of context. I just added the idea of syntactic, right? But this is the context, it's the way in which we create phrases or clauses and which are our possibilities. Uh, um, right? Therefore, whenever you have the problem when you don't know which word class is, what you have to do is trying to look for the theory or remember the theory and then see which are your possibilities. There are other problems with these mixed word classes in prepositions as well. Some of them are prepositions and some others are conjunctions, right? But we're going to see that later on. Okay, so simple adverbs can be used as another part of a speech, fast as an adjective or an adverb, or down as a preposition or an adjective, right? Simple adverbs by compounding. Okay, this is the second form in which you can create an adverb is by compounding. Like for example, anyway, they have lost their independent meaning. Therefore, what you have is two separated lexemes, any and way, and then when they are put together, they mean something different. Therefore, they create a new lexeme. And that's the way in which you can create some other adverbs. B, compound adverbs. Two or more elements into a single word. It's the very same idea as before, right? Nowhere heretofore. And here we have some others, notwithstanding, henceforth, and so on and so forth. C, adverbs derived by suffixation, and this is probably the best known form, but I'm going to add, not me, but authors, they add some further suffixes like wise and ward, right? Therefore, seaward, homeward, peacewise, and streetwise are all of them are adverbs, right? So let's remember that you can derive something into an adverb by using the suffixes ly, wise, and ward. Finally, and perhaps the most interesting ones are the fixed phrases. These phrases never vary in form. That is to say, you can't change their members, right? You can't say at course or 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 of course, right? Like of the preposition. Sorry, like of the other one, like the adverb, right? These phrases never vary in form, therefore they are called fixed phrases, and their component words have lost their meaning in isolation because they are creating a new lexeme, and that lexeme is an adverb, right? It is interesting, to me at least, because apparently this is the very first process in which you are going to create a new lexeme. That is to say, the usage is so common that you are not able to vary it, or to vary the usage, right? Or to vary the position of the different lexemes. Therefore, they get stagnated, I would say, or they get they get bonded, right, to each other as a fixed phrase. And this is perhaps the first step um, before adding the hyphen in the middle of them or between them, just to erase the blank space. Therefore fulfilling the orthographic definition for lexemes, and later on the compression where you erase the hyphen and just put the words together, like for example in because, right? So yeah, this is perhaps the very first or the earliest form of new lexeme, of a new compound lexeme. Summary. Adverbs have two major functions. They are modifiers and adverbials. Adverbs have four major forms: simple, compound, forms with suffixes, and fixed phrases. And some adverbs have the same form as adjectives, or informally adjectives forms are used as adverbs. Roles and meaning. The primary function of an adverb is to modify adjectives. I'm rather partial to parsnips. I'm going to do this because Okay, I'm going to do the last one. The last one is more interesting than the first one. Why? Because, sorry, because what we're going to see is a very big adjective phrase. This is an adjective phrase, right? And this adjective phrase has a prepositional phrase complement. We saw this during our previous lesson. It's an adjective head. And here we are seeing how an adverb is modifying the adjective. But later on, what we see is the prepositional phrase complement of the adjective phrase. And then you just create the adjective phrase, the prepositional phrase regular analysis, right? Calculated, that's an adjective. That's a participial adjective. And then value, a very long adjective phrase. Let's take a look at the second example now. Utterly, hopelessly, horribly glad. Just today, some people were asking whether there's an adverb phrase inside of this adjective phrase or not, right? Let's remember this is an adjective phrase. We don't know the role. Utterly, hopelessly, horribly glad. And the answer is no. Why? Well, because in order to have an adverb phrase inside of an adjective phrase, what you need is that two different adverbs are working together, right? So how can I prove that? So in order to prove it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, first of all, erase them. Why? Because they are modifiers. That is to say, they are optional. I'm going to say glad, right? Then I'm going to add one by one. Utterly glad. Does it work? It works. Therefore, utterly is modifying glad. Hopelessly glad. It works. The same idea. Horribly glad. The same idea. And that's my proof that they are working with the head and not between each other. No se preocupe, Nicolás, estamos grabando. Therefore, they are separated elements. Let's remember that when we deal with this idea within adjectives, we call them free modifiers. They are free modifiers, okay? So all over again, how can I know when there's an adjective phrase or when there's an adverb phrase inside of another phrase? I must prove yeah, what I need to do is trying to prove whether those elements are working between each other and not with the head, right? The adverbs enough and ago are postposed. That is to say, they can be used as post modifiers. We're going to use this one. Heavy enough to crush like nickels on a stone. Okay, this is a very interesting phrase. This is a phrase, right? So heavy enough to crush like nickels on a stone. What we have is an adjective phrase. We don't know the valency pattern because this is just a fragment. Heavy is the adjective head. Enough is an adverb, is a post adverb, therefore post modifier, but then we have to crash like nickels on stone. And that's a verb phrase, therefore a clause, therefore square brackets. And inside of that, you have the verb phrase to crash, but then you have like. The word like can be different things, and we're going to review them. Like can be a verb, can be a preposition, and can be a conjunction. Okay, so how can I state which one is this? In order to be a verb, then it must have a kind of concord with some other elements inside of the very same clause on the one hand. But on the other hand, within this clause, we already have a verb phrase, which is to crush. Therefore, the possibilities for this being a verb are very low. So we have two other possibilities: to be a conjunction or to be a preposition. Conjunctions are words which we're going to use or we use in order to link, combine, get together clauses, right? Therefore, if like is a conjunction, most certainly there should be a clause right after it. I'm going to take a look at it and then I'm going to say Nichols on stone, and I can clearly see that's a noun phrase. Therefore, those possibilities are very low. Then, like is as a preposition. We already know that the canonical form of a prepositional phrase is a preposition head plus a noun phrase complement. Nichols on stone, then, as being a noun phrase, allows us to say that like is more like a preposition than a conjunction. Therefore, we're going to analyze it in that manner. Right? The name for this is a to infinitive clause acting as a complement for the adjective head heavy. Inside of that, you have the verb phrase verb to crush and the prepositional phrase. I think it's an object. No, it's an adverbial. It's a how, like Nichols on a stone, right? With a preposition head, and then it's a noun phrase complement, Nichols, and then the prepositional phrase, I think post modifier, with the preposition on and the noun phrase complement, noun head, stone. Okay, and that's a very big adjective phrase. Última. Adverb modifying other adverb. We know this. They'll figure it out really fast. I won't say much about that, right? Adverbs are less common modifiers of other adverbs. There are some common constructions. Okay, they are not that common. Therefore, we have some constructions. And there you have them. Pretty, so, very, too, much, much better or more, pretty, really well, pretty, really, very well, right here, there, right now, and pretty soon. Any question about adverbs before moving on? No, perfecto. Distinguidísimos, les envié esto. 1, 2, 3, 4 oraciones tomadas desde Cambridge Online Dictionary. La primera es brutalmente larga. Lo sé, sí lo sé. Necesito que eso quede hecho hoy día, todo esto para poder revisarlo. ¿Ya? Siendo las 15:04, nos vamos a volver a juntar a las 15:45 para poder revisar el desarrollo de las 4 oraciones. ¿Sí? ¿Alguna duda de lo que se debe hacer?
No, profe.
Perfecto.
Profe,
Dígame.
profe, ¿le puedo preguntar sobre las notas de la gente que no tiene las notas, la primera nota?
Perdón. Tenemos que poner una fecha. Para poder volver a tomar la prueba 1. ¿Sí?
Se va a retomar ya todo con la parte teórica y...
Yo tengo, depende de lo que deban. ¿Sí? No sé si la gente que deba las notas, chiquillos, mientras le contesto a la compañera, el resto puede comenzar a hacer el trabajo. Lo primero que tengo que decir es lo siguiente: las pruebas están divididas en 2 partes. Entonces, mi primera pregunta es, ¿la gente que debe las notas debe las 2 partes o solo una parte?
En mi caso solamente una parte.
Ya, perfecto.
Sí.
Perfecto. Entonces, lo que vamos a hacer, vamos a ver de inmediato. Tranquilidad, tranquilidad, ciudadanos. Tranquilidad, ciudadanos. Tranquilidad, ciudadanos. UDLA, UMCE Grammar 2, Test 1. Ahí estamos. Y yo tengo las respuestas. Y aquí están mis respuestas. Sí, sí. Ustedes están... Yo lo que voy a hacer es lo siguiente. Voy a enviar una prueba 1. ¿Sí? Completa, de nuevo. ¿Ya? Todo aquel que deba la prueba 1 la tiene que hacer. ¿Sí? Sí. Si usted está seguro que está su puntaje de la parte teórica aquí guardado, como lo estoy mostrando, no haga la primera parte y solo haga la segunda parte. Si usted no está seguro, prefiero que haga las dos partes. ¿Sí? ¿Queda claro eso, no?
Sí.
Ya, perfecto. ¿Cuándo hacemos eso? Pongámosle fecha de inmediato. Nosotros tenemos clases los días lunes. Entonces, el lunes 20. ¿Sí? Nosotros vamos a hacer la prueba la prueba 2, la vamos a hacer el miércoles 22. ¿Queda claro?
Sí.
Ya, perfecto.
O sea, que no se puede hacer después de eso tampoco.
No, pues porque ya después estamos listos y tenemos que tomar Resit esta semana. Y si hubiera algún problema con la prueba 2, tenemos solo una semana para poder revisarlo. ¿Cachai? Eso, entonces, yo creo, conociendo la ley de Murphy, que este es un consejo de profe, prefiero que todo el mundo que deba la prueba, dé la prueba de nuevo completa, porque muy seguramente algo va a pasar con el puntaje guardado, que no sé qué cosa, algo, ¿cachai? Y si pasa algo, no vamos a tener tiempo de reaccionar. ¿Queda claro eso, no?
Ya.
Entonces,
Sí.
prefiero asegurarnos, ¿cachai? Pues si yo te digo, ¿sabes qué? Yo tengo tu puntaje guardado y ponte tú que no lo tenga guardado. Después no tengo tiempo para hacer la otra prueba, ¿cachai? Entonces prefiero que todo el mundo haga la prueba de nuevo. ¿Cómo lo
Profe,
vamos? Dígame.
disculpe por interrumpirlo. En mi caso, el puntaje ya está puesto, está puesta la nota en Ocampo. Entonces, ahí tiene como una visión directa de la parte que sí di.
Dame
Que no sé si se acuerda que hubo un error al mandar la primera parte del formulario. Ese fue mi tema.
1, 2, grupo 3. Ignacio, ¿no? Perdón.
Cristóbal, Copa.
Cristóbal, ¿tu apellido Cristóbal?
Sí. Copa, con doble P.
Copa. Claro, yo
Sí.
no tengo la parte de teoría, sí tengo la parte de análisis.
Ujú.
Perfecto. Después tengo, ¿a quién más me falta? Óscar Aravena, no tengo su análisis. El análisis de Grandón, de Guerra, de Jaime Llanos y Quesada. O sea, solamente me falta la parte de análisis nomás, po. Tengo los puntajes guardados.
Y yo revisé mi correo, profe, y yo le mandé esa parte de análisis. Por lo menos yo. Entonces no
Su
sé qué puede
apellido
haber pasado.
es, perdón,
Guerra, Valentina Guerra.
Valentina. ¿Tú lo enviaste? Si lo enviaste, reenvíalo.
Sí,
Reenvía el correo viejo porque
te
tiene
voy
la
a
fecha
reenviar el
vieja.
correo de nuevo.
Claro, tiene la fecha vieja.
Ya.
Exacto. ¿Cachai?
Eso puedo hacer yo también, si quieres, como para evitar lo atado.
Sí, pues obvio, pues si
En el
tenía el
momento de
correo.
mandar el formulario y reenviar el correo con la foto, porque sí lo puedo encontrar.
Déjame ver en el formulario, espérame, a lo mejor estamos hinchando de nada y tenemos lo de en el formulario, pues. Acabo de cerrar el formulario, ¿no? Sí. Tranquilidad, tranquilidad. Un Grammar 2 Cátedra 1. Respuestas en el Excel. Entonces, lo que voy a hacer es buscar. ¿Cómo busco aquí? No puede ser tan fome esta cosa, po, además que se puede buscar, po.
Profe, espera que llegué hace poco. ¿No tiene mi análisis? El otro día se lo había reenviado el correo.
Espérame, estamos viendo
Ah, ya,
cómo
ok.
buscar. El primer compañero, su apellido era, perdón,
¿Quién es el
Eh,
primer compañero?
Copa, ¿no?
Ah, sí, Copa, WP.
Si hago aquí, si aprieto aquí, me echo todo el, ¿cierto que sí? Sí, pues. Ah, estoy por hinchando, chiquillos, tranqui. Estamos haciendo esto mientras la gente realiza sus análisis. No, no lo encuentra. Con mayúsculas. No, no está. No, no está. Entonces el problema es que si tú me envías el correo en el que me lo enviaste, tendría que estar la respuesta dentro del correo, pues si no, no soy capaz de verlo porque el Google no lo reconoce. Pues. Según Google no está, ¿cachai?
¿Como el formulario?
Claro, pues.
Que ese fue el tema. Se me cayó el internet cuando apreté o sea, cuando estaba terminando el formulario, se me cayó la página y volvió
Volvió a cero.
al inicio.
Claro, no se envió nunca. Entonces, claro, hay que hacer una parte teórica y pues, ¿cachai?
Mm, sí, sí, eso es lo que me falta.
Ya, perfecto. Había otro compañero que estaba hablando recién, perdón.
sí, era yo, Llanos Vergara, Lucas Alejandro.
Vergara.
El 18, salve ahí.
Ya no, me falta la parte de teoría. Si usted la envió, reenvíeme el correo.
La teoría era el
O sea,
análisis,
la
¿verdad? De la
parte,
frase.
la
Sí,
parte de análisis, perdón,
ya,
disculpa. Sí.
sí. Ya se lo voy a enviar de nuevo. ¿Le pongo algo
Perfecto.
en el... alguna
Profesor,
explicación?
reenvío la parte de análisis de la prueba 1. Eso.
Ah, ya, ok, ya, al tiro lo mando.
¿Sí? Y así vamos a ir cerrando de a poco. Eso.
Profe, yo, Valentina Guerra, le acabo de enviar. No sé si pudiera. Ay, no le adjunto nada. Ahí está.
Ahí está. Ya, ahí está.
Eso,
Perfecto. Ok, lo tengo.
gracias.
Ya, entonces contigo estamos al día. Ahí después te voy a escribir cuando lo tenga revisado, te envío el puntaje. Bueno, igual también lo vas a ver en un campo, ¿no? Porque va a subir la nota. Eso. Pregunta. Aravena, Cortés y toda la gente que aparece aquí sin análisis, ¿están por ahí? ¿No están? ¿Votaron el curso? No lo sabemos, ¿cierto? Ya. Entonces con ello voy a escribir un correo. Lo voy a dejar esto hecho hoy día ya. Prueba 1, 11. Grammar 2. Ya. Eso, pues. Los dejo trabajar tranquilos. 15:45 nos juntamos. Ok, regresamos. Falta una T. Okay, we're going to begin with the review of this, and if you have any doubt, just let me know. The German-born father of Chilean presidential candidate José Antonio Caz was member of the Nazi Party, according to a recently unearthed document revelations that appear at odds with the far-right candidate's own statements about his father's military service during the Second World War. It's a really big sentence. The very first thing I'm going to say is the fact that apparently we have an adverbial. So I'm going to say this. Okay, this is the subject, right? The German-born father of okay, here we have a prepositional phrase, and now we have a noun phrase complement, Chilean presidential candidate, and then here we have a noun phrase in a position. Was what? A member of the Nazi party, a member of the Nazi party. That's the very beginning, right? Okay, so this is a noun phrase subject. German born, interesting, compound adjective. Father. And here we have the prepositional phrase. The German born father of Chilean. Yeah, it's a compliment because it's obligatory. I need that information. Preposition head. Noun phrase complement. Chilean. Okay. Presidential, the very same. Candidate. And then Jose Antonio Cast. Here we have a noun phrase post modifier. And as it's a name, I think it's just a noun head. And that's it. Here we have our verb phrase verb. Really simple. A member, this is a noun phrase. Was this a member? Prepositional phrase. I think it's also important, therefore complement. The is a determiner and Nazi is a noun. Finally, party is our head. Then, according to a recently unearthed document, revelations that appear at odds with the far-right candidates on the father's military say, oh, it's really long. Okay. According to is a preposition. You can look it up on a dictionary. And it goes till the very end. Prepositional phrase. A recently unearthed document revelations that, okay, here we have a clause. That appear verb at odd, that's an adjective, with the far-right candidate's own statement, his father military surgery. Okay. With noun phrase complement, the far-right candidate's own statement about prepositional phrase. His father's noun phrase complement, military service during another prepositional phrase. What else? We have the far-right candidate's own statement. Whose own statement? The candidate, the far-right candidate. Whose or what kind of a statement? A whose? His father military service. Whose or what kind of military? No, whose. Okay. So this is a prepositional phrase, adverbial, because he can place it at the very beginning. According to is a preposition head, followed by this huge noun phrase complement. I'm gonna make space in this because it's gonna be really, really big. A determiner, recently unearthed document revelation. The question is recently modifying what? Obviously an adjective. Therefore, we have an adjective phrase. pre-modifier with an adverb pre-modifier and an adjective head. Document revelations. Document noun. Pre-revelations noun head. And then we have the green. This is a that clause I think is complement because it seems to be important to in order to understand the type of revelation. That is a subordinating conjunction. Appear is the verb phrase verb made out of the verb head. At odd. If you look it up at odd in the Cambridge Online Dictionary, it's a fixed phrase. It's a fixed phrase. It's something like an adjective, perhaps. Even though at odds or at odd is a fixed phrase, we don't have the clear word category where it belongs to. So apparently I can change at odd that appear at odds, strange that appear strange with the far right hand is on strange. It seems you can replace it by an adjective, and just because of that, I'm going to say it's an adjective. Just one single lexeme. Then we have the prepositional phrase with the, it's a not, no, it can't be an object that appear at odd. Yeah, it's an adverb. Why do I say it's an adverb? I say, or I state that at odd is an adverb because if you remember during the theory part, adverbs can be created by fixed phrases. At odd is a fixed phrase. First reason. Second reason, that appear with whom? With the far right candidate, right? Therefore, with the far right, that prepositional phrase is an object. There's no valency pattern. There's no valency pattern where you can place a subject complement and then an object. What you can have is an adverbial and then an object. Therefore, based on those two different ideas, I would say that at odd is an adverb. Adverbial other head, and now it makes sense. Preposition head and then noun phrase complement with the far right candidate. It begins with a genitive phrase acting as a determiner. Inside of it, we have a determiner pre-modifier. Far right. I would say that far right is one single lexeme. And it's an adjective. And then candidates is a noun head. Next to that, own statement. Own adjective, right? It seems. Determiner or pronoun. Oh, really weird. Verb. Adjective. Her own accord. Okay, that's the very same example we have. So it's an adjective. Why did I state at the very beginning that I think it was an adjective? Because of the context, right? We already had the determiner, so later on we can't have many more. The only possibility was to have an adjective, right? And then statements, noun head, and then a prepositional phrase. About this, I also think it's a complement because it's an obligatory information with a preposition head, and then we have a noun phrase complement. Inside of that, we have again this genitive phrase acting as a determiner, pre-modifier, and here we have he is simple. determiner pre, father, noun head. And here we have military, 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 that's an adjective. Service, another prepositional phrase. I think this is post modifier. Preposition head, noun phrase complement, determiner pre, and Second World War, I think is just one single noun. And that's it. ¿Alguna pregunta?
Profe, me perdí en una parte.
¿Qué parte se perdió?
En la primera genitive phrase que puso.
La marco. La
la-
primera está.
Abajo no, en la segunda, ahora en la segunda línea.
La primera está esta de aquí
Esa es una genitive. Ah,
y está puesta.
ahí, justo ahí está.
aquí.
Ah, ya.
Ahí está. Acuérdate, las genitive phrases son los que la gente le llama posesivos. Genitive phrases. Termina en el posesivo, pero la pregunta es dónde comienza. Para saberlo, hay que preguntarnos si es que es una specifying o identifying. La respuesta es esta. Si responde a whose, es specifying. ¿Cachai? O sea, es un determiner. Y llega hasta el principio de la noun phrase. Si, si responde a what kind of, ¿sí? Es queda solita. Queda solo la palabra sola y se transforma en un pre-modifier.
Ah, ya. Gracias, profe, que no la vi. O sea, no la recordaba. Gracias.
No se preocupe, tiene que estar atenta a eso. Cuidado que puede salir. Más dudas, más dudas, más dudas. Estuvo duro esto. Era harto. No difícil, sí. No está difícil.
Profe, entonces en ese caso, far right es el adjective pre-modifier. Las
Exacto.
dos cosas juntitas.
Sí, yo creo que far right es una fixed phrase. ¿Cachai? Es como far left. ¿Cachai? Nadie dice middle left, nadie dice near right. ¿Cachai? El concepto es far right. Por eso lo asumo como solo un lexema y lo dejo como adjective. Porque es una característica del candidato. ¿Cachai? Más dudas, más dudas. ¿Estamos entonces? Ya.
Sí,
El
no hay duda.
lunes necesito las otras 3 hechas porque es todo lo que vamos a hacer el lunes, más todas sus preguntas para la prueba del día miércoles.
Profe, ¿y se acuerda de que habíamos quedado de ir un día? Que creo que las votaciones, no sé si mis compañeros lo recuerdan.
Hay
¿O estoy
problemas.
mal?
Hoy día anduve en el PEDA. Hoy día anduve en el PEDA y estamos con problemas porque se requiere solicitar permiso y he atado. He atado. De hecho, hoy día no me querían dejar entrar en el PEDA porque no me había inscrito en la lista de no sé qué cosa. Atado.
Ah, ya.
Sí, así que para evitar el problema y considerando que queda tan re poco, prefiero que lo hagamos online y si alguien tiene más problemas, bueno, nos juntamos el lunes en la noche. Yo no tengo atado porque yo el lunes ya estoy libre en la noche. Terminé las clases en la América, así que menos problema.
Ah, perfecto.
¿Ya?
Eso quería confirmarlo solamente.
Ok. Así que eso, po. El día lunes entonces tienen que llegar con esto hecho. Y todas las dudas que pudieran tener. Recuerden que los análisis, como lo vimos ahora, pueden aparecer cosas que ya hemos visto antes. Entonces, les pido que los hagan de verdad, que los hagan y que los hagan a conciencia. No esperen para la prueba una dificultad menor a esta. Es de aquí hacia arriba. No mucho
Profe,
más arriba, pero como esto. Dígame.
nos va a poner 2 ejercicios, como siempre.
Sí,
Sí, y nos va a dar un poquito más de tiempo, como la vez anterior costó un poquito.
les voy a... Mira, yo creo que 3 horas caleta. ¿Cachai? De hecho, las pruebas en presencial duraban 90 minutos. ¿Cachai? 3 horas son, ¿cuánto es? 120, 180. Ah, es menos. Po. Ah, el doble. El doble. ¿Cachai? Con 3 horas yo creo que está de más. Pero veámoslo, conversémoslo y veamos cómo funciona.
Ok.
Ya, eso. Que estén todos súper, estudien harto. Necesito que, de verdad, lo digo en serio, hagan los ejercicios. Necesito que hagan los ejercicios. ¿Ya? Así que eso, nos vemos el lunes. Cualquier cosa, me estoy comunicando con la gente de las notas que deben y eso. Por correo, por supuesto.
Ya, profe. Que esté bien.
Que
Cuídese.
estén todos muy bien.
Gracias.
Cuídense mucho.
Chao, profe,
Chao, chao.
cuídese.
Ya,
Cuídese.
profe,
Chao.
sube la clase lo antes posible, porfa. Chao.
Rendería y sube.